this is going to be an exciting session this morning. And oftentimes we've talked about response rates. Those of us on the sales side, those of us on the marketing side, response rates aren't what they used to be. We've looked at various things. We spend a whole lot of money on the MarTech stack and the sales stack. We have more sales processes. So why is our pipeline really getting crappy? So this is a key issue for a lot of us on the call. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. There shouldn't be any side to begin with anyways. So something's changed, and COVID has clearly exacerbated some of the situations. Your BDRs can't turn around and find people, because you can't call the company anymore. Who knows what the phone is and what's going on? So there's a lot of unique challenges. And I think, and you'll hear Jeff talk, a lot of it's an evolving thing. BDR activities have always been evolving. Throw AI on top of it, and you've got an entirely new beast. So I've had the opportunity, I've known Jeff Hoffman for more than 10 years. And I've also had the opportunity to work with him in doing some dramatic things. So this presentation today is near and dear to me. So as I introduce Jeff, obviously he's been an inspiration for me. He's the creator of the award-winning Why You Now social paradigm in the Bachelor Strategy sales training program. He's delivered sold-out presentations to tens of thousands of sales professionals around the world. He's that good. He's going to live up to that billing today. He's addressed audiences within Fortune 500, and he's also taught in many of the B schools. So I mean, because Jeff's that good. So including Wharton, MIT, and Sloan. So it's great stuff. So today, Jeff and I are going to discuss the challenge of selling, especially with BDR-driven organizations. And this is, from personal experience, oftentimes BDR done right, becomes very much a secret weapon, for the sales funnel. But things have changed as we've discussed. So we're going to jump into this. So Jeff, welcome. Before we start, fill us in on what you're doing these days, what the company's doing, and then we're going to begin our BDR journey.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rob. What an awesome intro. That sounded great. I'd like to meet that guy until I realized it. That's cool. And I'm equally thrilled to join the whole group today on this topic. It's an important one. It's so topical, and it's mirroring the conversations I'm having and my team's having with our clients around the world. So this is really, really timely. I've been in sales about 30 years. I started a sales training company about 20 years ago, and it went through a lot of different evolutions, the largest being COVID. We had to, around 2020, make a decision on if we were going to continue down the path of traditional live in-person instructor-led based training, the way our industry has always done it, or do we think that COVID was really the harbinger of something more permanent? And maybe that means we have to redefine how we deliver our content. We chose the latter. I'm glad we did. We spent a couple of years really changing our content to make it virtual worthy and virtual ready, so you could actually consume it in a pleasant way in situations like this, and et cetera. So we made this massive pivot as an organization, and happy to say that the market has welcomed it wonderfully. We've been able to usher our old standing clients through this change while attracting lots of new ones. So we're really happy about making that turn of our head toward what we all kind of know people have realized. We all kind of thought virtual training and virtual learning and virtual conversations would be a part of our future. But I think what people have underestimated is just how significant the tolerance is, or lack of tolerance, for millennials and Generation Z on how long they can sit in front of a camera and do this. So recognizing that generation, I'm just doing a quick scan across the Brady Bunch tile here. You're all about my age. So we can do this for half an hour. We can do this for an hour. All right. There are people on my staff that cannot. There are people on my staff that have 10 minutes, 20 minutes. That's all they got. That's the new market. So that was a bigger part of the shift in our pivot, not just going to virtual, but how do we deliver content in bite-sized morsels? Where before the appetite was, we'll give you 2 hours. Now it's 20 minutes. So those changes were significant. Happy to say that most of them are in our rearview mirror and we're now executing. But yeah, that's where we are today. And we've got about 300 clients around the world, lots in the Fortune 50, but also lots in that kind of, let's call it C round startup. Maybe the proof of concepts there, they have revenue stream and they're seeing a path to growth and profitability. That's usually when we come in. and where our roads all meet is that the catalyst for what I do, sales training, the catalyst is similar to what drives the questions that Rob was bringing up. When we come into an organization, we're likely coming into an organization that felt one of the following catalysts in the last 90 days. Massive desire to hire, because that's a big turner for us. Something to do with their product, something to do with the competition, something to do with the market. There's always an external force that when you watch the dominoes fall, one of those dominoes is we have to train our reps better. So what happens is when I go into a client engagement, I'm having conversations like this one right now. Even though this conversation will have nothing to do with training, I have lots of non-training conversations because the reason we're sitting there is because, and Rob, this is a big one, hey, we were solving this BDR top of the funnel math problem with straight algebra. X number of heads yields this many touches, this many conversions, this many pipeline additions. The ratio has gotten so terrible that I no longer can use algebra as my guidepost. I can't just say, okay, well, I want to triple it, so let's triple the hire. So now I realize I've got this bloated BDR function that's giving me withering returns. What are we doing wrong? And it's rarely a technique issue and more of a structure issue, which leads us to this call. So this is the kind of conversation I have frequently.
All right, so Jeff, I want to pull that thread. And so what's built into what you just said is conversion rates.
Yes.
And so I want to talk about conversion rates. And, you know, I'm going to be a little bit flip here. Our conversion rates, the George Santos of the marketing funnel, are they fantasies? Are they lies? And what's the story with conversion rates as you look at this? Because that's going to affect the algebra that you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's the first thing I always want to look at what conversion rates are with our client work. And you're dead on, because what generally happens is even the definition of an organization's conversion from stage to stage can vary from executive to executive in the organization. We want to consider conversion rates. Another way of thinking about them, because a lot of people think about them as like a converted rate means that the opportunity improved, or that the lead got stronger, or we just got fuller pipeline. That's probably the wrong way to look at conversion rates, because that kind of builds into our analysis the optimism and hope to advance. Rather, what we want to do in conversion rates and see what has changed as far as the behavior of the buyer. So when we track conversion rates appropriately from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel, we're thinking about more on how is the customer changing. So for example, an inbound, the three classic conversion rates at the top of the funnel would be cold touch to positive response to scheduled meeting, and scheduled meeting to pipeline addition. That makes perfect sense, assuming that your customer or prospect is acting a little differently at each of those stages. But for many companies, they're not. For many companies, they're just classifications we're doing to organize our pipeline, but that customer sitting in stage 3 is really not behaving any differently than the customer at stage 1. So the first thing we want to be clear on is, what is a stage 1? What is a stage 2? What is the customer? How does the customer look different? Because they do. And that should define and inform how we set up our BDR function, instead of the other way around, which what we're doing now is I grabbed this morning out of my out of our little hutch, class little martini glass. We think the world looks like this. We all think the world looks like this. We've been talking like this for 30 years, right? Top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. Let's call it 3X. That looks about right. Therefore, each sales stage must be a 3X conversion rate. So if I want 10 closed units here, I need 30 here, I need 90 here. That's good in theory, but I've looked at, I don't know, 10,000 pipelines in my life. I've never seen one that looked like this, not once. Organizations that win, this is what it looks like in the actual forecasted pipeline. But the world of the BDR does not live in here. They live here. And we're going to take advantage of a high touch model and absorb a lousy conversion rate here. So what quickly happens, Rob, if you're doing it this way, is that you're going to define conversion rates up here that are going to be 10 to 1, 12 to 1, 20 to 1, until you get into the real world where those conversion rates can collapse. If you're looking at conversion rates to remain static, I would challenge you why, because they're different motions, and that's really why the BDR role is so troubled right now.
Yeah, obviously it's gonna differ by industry as you've seen. But the other thing, if we're gonna throw some stuff on top of this, obviously visibility for executives becomes key, and visibility into, and oftentimes visibility comes with its ugly friend called more sales process, Jeff.
Yeah.
And so let's throw some more sales process. Let's throw some more,
sales tech, marketing tech
function. Yeah. So what do we do?
So the urge to apply science to the Rumpelstiltskin room of sales is smart. That's a good idea. And historically, generally, most organizations can have usually have pretty good footing when you look at closed deals anyway. Most companies have good data on closed deals. So you can start to do some trend analysis and figure out kind of what our ideal targets are. But you're absolutely right. The mass introduction of things like technology and different types of techniques to address the problem doesn't really work. And here's what I want everyone to kind of think about. Think about either your company or your client's pipeline, sales pipeline. Where does it start? Where do we define the start of it? I've always considered marketing messaging to be inclusive and sales messaging to be exclusive. That's just my opinion. Marketing being inclusive in that the entire idea of marketing is join the party. There's a seat for you at the table, no matter who you are. This is why it works for you. This is why it works for you. So the inclusive nature of the vocabulary of marketing is how you generate the largest amount of interest. But then when you convert that interest into actual pipeline, the horrible word qualification comes up. But really what we're talking about is how does the rep now get exclusive with the language? So no, this is not for everybody. It's for you. No, don't worry about this is your problem. This is your world we're going to fix. You're the special snowflake. So where does that flip have to happen between everyone join the party and you're a special snowflake? Your decision on where that flip happens needs to happen against the part of the pipeline with the greatest jeopardy, which is the discovery call.
Mm-hmm.
The discovery call is the biggest risk to the pipeline. More deals die on the heels of a discovery call than any stage in the book. And you guys already know that intuitively. There are reasons for it, but the largest one is what I just described. Think about how most organizations have aligned BDRs. Most BDR organizations do not conduct their discovery calls. They might have an intro call. They might do a BANT call. They might do some kind of qualification call. But a fully throated, deep dive discovery call, it's unlikely. Generally, the BDR is tasked to close those discovery calls. But think about where the BDR is now exiting. They're exiting before the biggest trouble spot.
Oh.
And scientifically, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't it make more sense to have a BDR function that owns it through discovery? And since we're absorbing risk anyway at the top of the pipeline, and we're going to hit it with numbers, then let's absorb all of the risk. So when it flips over to the AE or whatever the role is, they're not getting a qualified account. They're getting a post-discovery opportunity, which by definition is forecastable.
Yeah. So Jeff, let's go deeper. Let's dive into the discovery call for a minute, because the organizations that I'm talking to, they have different perceptions of what discovery is. And how they get their teams trained around. Could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. And there's so many definitions for this, and I'm not trying to get the corner store on all definitions, but when I started in sales, I was unlucky or lucky enough. I came from non-tech and went to tech. I was in commercial real estate, then I went into software. When I made that shift, the first things my bosses told me in the software space was, Jeff, forget about all that stuff you learned in commercial real estate. We don't do it this way. We're technology. We do it this way. And I said, okay. And I was introduced to the notion of a discovery call. So you got to get X number of discovery calls a month. In my youth and in my, self-consciousness, I was embarrassed to say I didn't know what a discovery call was. So I just said, okay. And I started doing discovery calls based on how I would define it. And I wasn't even in the industry, and I defined it wrong. I got it dead wrong. And thank God I got it wrong, because it led to a lot of success. How'd I get it wrong? I never thought discovery meant us, the vendor, discovering more about the customer or prospect. I never thought that's what it meant. I thought it was inverted. I thought the idea was they had to discover the joys of me. They had to discover the joys of what we did, that they walk into the meeting the way we all walk into meetings. Bored, barely interested, and expectations of failure. That's how we walk into all these first vendor meetings, don't we, as buyers? Who walks into a vendor meeting as a buyer going, I hope I learned something fun? No one. People walk in assuming I have to eliminate this, and statistically, I'm going to, because I might do 100 of these a year and buy 5 things. So my thinking was I wanted to do that. If you know that classic acronym, attention, interest, desire, action, AIDA, been around a million years. This is where it has meaning to me. The bridge between I and D, interest and desire, that's what a discovery call, I believe, is destined to do. When it's successful, they walked in, the sausage maker interested, and they came out with some level of desire. Not enough to buy, not enough to give you a verbal, you're very early. But the idea is we're moving from the brain to the heart. And think about it, guys. Do you want your prospects interested in you? Do you want your clients' prospects interested in them? And you're all going to say yes. I say yes. And then you fast forward through a 30-minute discovery call meeting. And that rep says at the end of 30 minutes, so Bob, what do you think? And Bob goes, interesting. Is that a success or a failure? We all know that's a failure. So we just said we wanted them interested. You guys just said I'm interested when it's a failure. That's right. Because interest is fleeting and that's what gets the meeting. So I would argue the BDR has to focus on attention and interest. And that long chasm between interest and desire, this is where the thoughtfulness has to come in. Where does the BDR hand this off? Does the BDR eat this? Does the BDR give it off early? What's the role of the AE? But that meeting, that discovery call where all deals perish. Yeah, Rob, my definition internally and our client's definition is we've got a deal identified as post-discovery, it means that we've identified someone in that organization that said, I think I want this. I don't know if I can afford it, but I think I want it. Because that's when conversion rates go from 10 to 1 to 1.5 to 1. See,
yeah.
We want the AEs to enjoy this kind of ratio, the STEM. And what's happening now with the BDR function and all the reasons we can talk about is that we have expectations of this STEM conversion rate way up here, and it got a lot harder in the last even 6 months to be in the top of that class.
Yeah. So Jeff, we're gonna, and for everybody in the audience, add your questions to the chat or chime in. But I want to just dive in on a couple things that Jeff said.
Sure.
That I think are critically important here. So Jeff, the expectations for the BDR that you just set requires training, because the BDR function, it's like, okay, Joey was working at Walmart last week and he's ambitious, so we're bringing him in and we're not training him. And so, hey Joey, go and schedule a demo. Okay. So and then the results are abysmal. What do we have to do as organizations to, one, recognize who we have to hire in this role, and how do we train them so we can talk, we can hit A and I, and then ultimately the transition.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the cart is not driving the horse. So unfortunately what's happened is we have organizations now with some legacy sales and marketing tech, legacy BDR function, legacy BDR definition, and they're trying to fit that into the new world and they're struggling. So the first thing we're going to do is rewind a little bit and consider, okay, well, how are we capturing the suspect, the market? How are we capturing them? Ultimately, there's generally 3 ways we're going to do it. It's going to be outbound, just plain old cold outbound, and that's generally a sales function. It's inbound, non-event related, which is generally BDR or inside sales function. And then there's inbound event driven, which is generally a marketing catalyst. So there's the person who came in as an inbound on the website at the info at, and that's largely due to the branding of marketing. And then there's the one who signs up for a webinar. That's the result of lead gen, because marketing is really doing 2 things in their messaging. So Those are the three results. We're going to have a human being at the end of that story, someone that has no idea who you are and you have to go find them. Someone who only has an idea of who you are, but not event. They just kind of know who you are through branding. And they say, oh yeah, I think I'm researching. This is something we're researching. Or I've never heard of you, but this is an interesting event or piece of data or asset. So where do we want to divide and conquer those three buckets, and where should they go? Traditionally today, that's not happening. Traditionally, what happens is anything early is BDR land. And once it's qualified, it's rep land. That's a mistake. Because of the three groups I just mentioned, there is no question that the second group, the inbound lead off of a branding, is the most potent. It's the most potent lead. It's the lead most likely to close of the three. The third lead, that's the one that came in on a marketing event. There we have a different wrinkle. They are very powerful leads. They have the shortest shelf life. Generally, you can take an inbound lead from info at, and you can have a cadence where they don't get touched for 3 days. And that's actually wise. You want to have a little scarcity there. But the event-driven lead, the marketing-driven lead, called the MQL, whatever, you measure that lead in hours. And truthfully, the power, let's say I'm selling to Sammy. When do I want to engage? And I'm a rep, and I'm a sponsor of Sammy. I'm making this up. I'm a sponsor of Sammy, and as part of my rewards for being a healthy sponsor, I get access to the attendee list, as well as those who signed up but didn't go. Where are the most powerful leads in that bucket and when? That's easy. The most powerful list is the one of all the registrants, and the most powerful place to hit them is the day before the event. The day before the event, because that's where it has its most realistic potency for the buyer. It's in their calendar. It's something they're doing tomorrow, and maybe they'll blow it off and see the replay later. But it's familiar. It's present. We talk about sales being timing. This is where it is. But think about how we're doing it with BDRs now. BDRs are just getting big sandwiches filled with assorted leads every day, morning, whatever. And typically that second bucket, which is the most powerful and should have an AE on it, has a BDR on it. And the ones that I mentioned, that third group, that can have a BDR on it, but they need to be on it before the event, not a week after the event, which leaves the outbound, which is the weakest of the buckets, to go back where it belongs in the AE world. Because the outbound source of opportunity has the worst conversion rates. Therefore, personalization through chat and AI and sales tech will not help you. It will hurt you. So what we have is we have the reality of the three buckets of opportunities, and we've got this sales organization that's not even aligned with them appropriately. So the first step, Rob, I think, is looking at your data and seeing, okay, where are our best leads coming from? Can we identify kind of general sources of leads? And how should we attack them in a perfect world? If each of those buckets was siloed, how would we attack them? Chances are overwhelming the answers you're going to get will not be supported by your current model.
Oh, yeah, interesting. It sounds like we've got this.
Someone said AE, account executive, traditional sales role. Yeah, sorry, Dan. Yeah, AE.
It's what you just said. It sounds like we're backward.
We are, because we thought, you mentioned earlier, I think in one of your events, you talked about we talk about the legacy of COVID and the legacy of work from home and the legacy of sales tech tools, marketing tools. Yeah, all true. Chat, AI, all true. But don't underestimate the legacy that HubSpot created in our language.
Mm-hmm.
And the role, and even the idea of content marketing and the role of inbound content marketing. That somehow, I hate using this verb, but it's absolutely the right verb. That idea got perverted. It got perverted in the idea that the effort to go downstream in market would be a similar algebra problem. That if I'm reaching the Fortune 50, I got it. I get this model, I get the whole thing. As I go south into mid-market, into SMB, the idea that a BDR direct call, direct email would be the catalyst to move outbound, it's never been proven in the history of sales, but the timing was right. Let's call it 2016, where traction was happening. Traction was happening. Social was fairly new and the rules hadn't been established. I mean, think about the number of DMs from strangers you might have answered in 2018 and how you don't answer any anymore. So I think we kind of got fooled with the HubSpot concept of how we go downstream. And the idea was if we have enough kind of wood behind the bat on outbound activity, given the technology that exists today, then it's just a numbers game. And what no one really counted on was that the numbers were going to disintegrate exactly the same way. And you could track this point to point. If you look at, granted, B2C, not B2B, look at telemarketing in the 80s and 90s. It's the same arc. It's the same effective arc. At some point, the source or the vehicle, in this case, the phone, is rendered useless. When the buyer no longer has confidence in the vessel, in the vehicle of communication, they abandon it. There was a time when you had your cell phone, you answered every call. And now, is there anyone on this Zoom that if they get a call on their cell phone, it says unknown number, is anyone here who picks it up? Yeah. See, this gets institutionalized very quickly because it only takes so many picking up a call and hearing the fake familiar voice that's trying to sell me something before I no longer am interested in engaging any unknown calls. And that is exactly what's happened in email. And it's already happened. It's already happened in email. This isn't coming. It's happened. It's in the rearview mirror. It's like a star going out. It takes a while before we see that because of light years and light traveling. But email is dead for prospecting. It effectively is finished for prospecting. Why? This AI really tripped that one up because what AI does is I already am annoyed by unsolicited emails and unsolicited DMs. But if I start to believe that a percentage of these were written by a computer, I don't trust any of them. And that's exactly what the market has been telling us.
All right, so, let's go down that path, Jeff. And Dan just threw something. I'm looking at all the comments. Pam, if I miss any of the questions that are coming in, by all means, chime in. But Dan just wrote, curious about the comparison to telemarketing content. We're a small business catching up, and I would prefer to skip the content creation pain if it is already redundant. So there's even a question behind this question: is the whole, I would say, content incontinence. We've got so much content out there. Well,
it is, but it's largely because everyone's like looking at content as a big catch-all phrase. Look, it starts with, where does your market live? Content creation on LinkedIn doesn't make a lot of sense to an IT buyer. They're not on LinkedIn every day.
Yeah.
So I don't know who you're creating content for. Now you're creating content. Now, if you're selling to HR, maybe. Selling to marketing, maybe. Selling operations, no. Selling legal, no. So let's start with just being really clear and remind ourselves that just because these social channels exist with large numbers of people that have accounts doesn't mean these are really viable places to make your message heard. So I think the role of content, I think, is only going to grow. I don't think that's going to shrink, but how it's delivered and how the prospect engages with the content, no question, that is rapidly changing.
Yeah, and this, and Ann just chimed in, she was asking about, the channels now, and she's also, Ann's comment is about, okay, are we delivering, is it bite-sized? Are the attention spans so short now that they're not going to read something big? And I know part of the answer is it depends, but, what general trends that you're seeing?
So, well, there's no question that the appetite for the buyer is meager. What we preach, and has always been the way that strong prospecting motions work. If you think back on any deal your company has ever signed, or your client's company has ever signed, and look at that deal and inspect it and analyze it and go, okay, the person who signed the PO, the person who signed the contract, rewind it. Was that the first person a rep ever talked to? We know that's always a no. We know that it requires some level of navigation in an organization to find your buyer. That would, on outbound particularly, that the idea that you're going to land a bullseye on your first call is unlikely. You're going to have to pivot and multi-thread and refer and do all the magical things that sales reps do all day. No shortcut to that, maybe a little. So what the challenge then, that's always been the case. So it makes less sense to go, what happens now is the BDR function is targeted with, we sell to CIOs, here's a list of 1,000, do your cadence, do your rhythm, do your motion. Instead of finding those that can be influenced, finding those in the organization that are more engaged with social, finding those that have a louder voice, finding those that might even be a content creator, that are in departments and divisions way to the left or the right of your buyer, but have some interest in the benefit of what you're selling. So you might be selling security and you sell to the CISO. Having a motion that has 20 reps pounding email, phone, and LinkedIn on 1,000 named CISOs, you're going to get nothing out of this. Nothing. As opposed to, where does security affect that organization? Why do they have a CISO in the first place? And figuring out what are the groups that are on the left or right of that place that would feel the benefits of your sale but have no influence on it and are not a player in it. That's where we recommend you put your prospecting efforts. They get less attention. They are easier to find because we're not looking for titles anymore. We're looking for people with heat. And now in a proper world, now that BDR is not, here's your 1,000 CISOs. It's you've got Atlanta. Here are the top 20 accounts in Atlanta. We're going to spiff you. We're going to count any meeting with a CISO against your quota. We'll have that the end game. But we're going to coach and teach you how to do prospecting away from the CISO so you get parachuted into the CISO from a happy prospect who gives you the reference. The reference element of selling has never changed. But the way we can reach people directly now with technology has fooled people to think it has.
So this is, let's talk about frameworks around what you just said. Wasn't this the objective of target account selling?
It
was.
was.
And I'm dating myself here, and then it's quasi new incarnation of account-based marketing. Okay, what
changed was this? What changed was this? Same thing that you're old like me. Same thing when emails showed up. Oh my God, I remember sending an email to Bill Gates and getting a response. It was a million years ago, but why? Because the culture hadn't caught up to the technology. It was considered rude to not respond to every email. So we get this explosion of technology that allows for incredible scalability on messaging on one hand. And on the other hand, the promise of one-to-one direct marketing that we've always kind of hoped for looks like it showed up. It looks like we can have it now with social. So you take the social crossing the chasm moments and the technology available, and let's sprinkle on all of that, all of the dollars this country enjoyed in 2020 and 2021. And it looks like it's that classic, I woke up on third base and thought I hit a triple.
Interesting. So let's talk about ABM for a minute, because some of your clients are going down the ABM path. And the dirty little secret, and anybody on the call wants to challenge me on this, a lot of ABM efforts aren't very successful.
Yeah.
And what you just described in the areas that you're hitting on kind of indicate why, but what are you advising your clients on these days? We have ABM, but it's not working. And what do we need to do?
So my best golf club in my bag is my 7-iron, because I can hit that 160 with my eyes closed, which is great when I'm 160 yards away. But I don't grab that club on the tee just because it's my favorite. First question we have to ask ourselves is, does our sale impact the entire organization we're selling to, or a large part of the organization? We like to tell ourselves all the things we sell do that. But in reality, is what we're selling, how wide are the ripples if they buy? How wide are the ripples to our product or service in this company? And if the answer is it's really limited to this group, is ABM really the way to go? Or is it more product-led based? Or is it more narrative based? Or is it more customer focused based? Yeah. It's almost like we as sales and marketing professionals all got into a room deciding that we were going to give a prescription without a diagnosis. And as good economies and great moments in time happen, it made us look really smart. Sales and marketing, we looked so smart in 21, didn't we? And now the same questions that we were getting pats on the shoulder for in 23 are like these, Jeff, every single data point we have, we're going down the toilet. Everything we thought was going to happen is going the opposite direction. So I think it starts with that question of, okay, what's the impact of your product and service at all? Yeah. Should you even be going downstream with a proactive motion? Or should you rely solely, are you a company that should maybe just focus on the 2 buckets of branding and lead gen and leave outbound prospecting completely out of the picture? Or flip side, that we are so early in the industry, we are so on the bleeding edge, we don't have a choice but to work executive level conversations to build a tombstone slide of all of our new customers. Maybe we're less worried about event driven and more concerned with the outbound motion. Let those questions get answered before you figure out how you get BDRs to work them. If you've got 50 BDRs in your organization and the math isn't adding up, if we start chopping heads or reassigning, that question has to be answered first.
Yeah, spot on. Thanks, Jeff. So quick pause here. I want to open up the floor before Jeff and I resume. Michael, Michael, you want to chime in? I think you had a question.
Yeah. There's so much to this that we could chat about, but I think you brought up the point about what I call the revenue wheel, and this is what a lot of VCs, PEs, and executives want to do. They just want to go in every day and turn the revenue wheel because they're convinced that the system of sales tech and the system of BDR is a revenue wheel, and all it needs to do is to be turned. And so they're incredibly resistant to change, surprisingly. What I'm finding, and I do a ton of research in this area, is just these buyers do not want to talk to a junior level BDR, period. So they don't have the knowledge of their business. And the way they approach the buyers is of no value to the buyers. So I'll give you one example. They teach BDRs to learn everything about the customer. Kind of, I know you, you know me, let's all get together. But the customer couldn't care less if they tell him, oh, I see you've got a new CMO. I see you've got new money. I see you're doing this. I see you're doing that. Zero interest. What they should be doing is reaching out and saying, I had a great conversation and I looked at your 2 competitors. They're performing at a higher level than you and solving this particular problem. I'd like to discuss this gap with you and help you close the gap. So you're not selling to pain, you're selling to performance gaps, and that works in this climate. But nobody's really thinking beyond providing a programmatic approach to reps. And there are about 30 that work, but they're just continuing to crank the revenue wheel and expecting the BDR to be the one that opens the opportunity with the buyer, versus it should be sales and marketing leadership that put programs in place to allow them to open the gap with the buyer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a great point, Michael. I agree with a lot of this idea. I mean, think back to earlier in this when I was talking about the 3 buckets of prospect, right? One's the inbound. That's one is pure outbound. One's inbound because of branding. One's inbound because of lead gen or marketing event. Given the profile you described well of the BDR, where are they the most likely to have success in those 3 buckets? It's not the first one. Unfortunately, it's where we put them all, because what you just described is dead on. Who should be talking to the one without interest, the one who doesn't know who you are? It has to be the more mature senior rep, because of the reasons you described. They have a better idea of context. They understand the industry. They have better questions. They have more experience. So doesn't it make more logical sense that the AE or traditional field rep or the traditional kind of seasoned rep is actually now focused on the outbound? And doesn't it make a ton of sense? And shouldn't the BDR, who although has less skill or history of achievement, but has the proper enthusiasm and excitement and muscle to do it, what would happen if you took a subsection of your BDR team and all you guys are going to do is work with field marketing on every marketing event this quarter, and your job is to touch every attendee or registrant before the event? I would argue not only would that group have success in touch rates, but to your point, Michael, I think they'll find a softer landing place because that's already an opt-in buyer. So they're less resistant. They're less like, I don't have time for this junior rep. They're not like that there because they already have demonstrated some interest and they're already saying, yeah, I want to go to a webinar. Yeah, have a rep call me. That ice cold statue in the back of the room that you can't get to show up to a webinar, you don't want a BDR calling that person for your reasons. But it's all about starting with, what is our market? Who are our buyers? Where do they live? And how do they look differently when they show up at our front door? Then the BDR question gets so much easier. But you're right. If we take that BDR function and just pray and spray into the larger 3 groups, the response you're talking about, Michael, is very real. We all feel it.
And I think it's partially who reaches out, but what I'm saying is it's how you reach out and the value that you add to the buyer. You could give a reach out strategy and an engagement strategy to an AM or a BDR, and they could be both successful. So what I'm trying to get at, it's actually the buyer value you're exchanging. It doesn't matter who's exchanging the buyer value, but if the buyer value is not programmatic in nature and thought through in nature, the buyer's not going to engage. That's what I'm trying to get at.
That makes sense. Oh,
Yeah.
one of the things that made me think of too, be aware of, we talk about sales stage lengths. And every time I ask an executive and I'll say, oh, what's your typical sales length? They always say the same thing, which you're all going to say if I ask you. Well, it depends. The answer is it doesn't depend. Because yes, on the outliers, I get you got a deal that closes in a day and a deal that closes in a year. I get it. But let's look at your last 20 deals. I bet that standard deviation isn't that great. So when we think about the length of a deal, it's more important than the length, the number of days. What's more important is number of touches or interactions required. That is a more important statistic. So it's not that it's a 3-month sales process, it's that it's at least a 5-touch sales process. There's this reference call we do, there's a demo, there's a trial, whatever it is, 5 touches, 8 touches, whatever. The less touches your sale demands, the more likely a BDR function can be Pac-Man and gobble down the nuggets. But the more touches required, the less likely the traditional BDR role will have impact on that sale.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I see an organization that's generally the organization we work with that are still killing it with their BDR team, 1 touch closes, 2 touch closes. Makes sense. But when I'm working with my Fortune 50s, you really think a BDR is going to have impact on a sale at Price Waterhouse? For the reasons you said, Michael, and more? Of course not. So the revenue wheel desire can still be fed and kept happy and warm and safe. If you're educating the VC, if you're educating the investor, if you're educating the board or the C-suite, that you're educating that way before I'm all in on the revenue flywheel. Let's make sure we found where it's going to exist. And those are the questions that have to come back to product, have to come back to executives.
This great. Jeff, this is great. I don't want to, I got 10 questions, but there's better questions. John Russo, you want to chime in? You put something interesting, about, we'll call them stalled deals or things that kind of go dormant.
Yeah, sure thing. And apologies, I just got back from the gym, so I'm not Zoom capable, but still working on losing those 10 pounds the doctor keeps telling me to lose year after year after year.
I think
after
I found
year.
them,
So
by the way. I found those.
there you go. Exactly. Yeah. So you may have just partially answered the question here. It's a weird economic climate right now, and our clients do a lot with intent data, which is picking up signals that show that buyers have interest. And they're reaching a point where, from a measurement perspective, they're engaged. They're at the engaged demand stage, but then zero activity afterward. They drop off completely. So what I was struggling with is, what is the mental model for when or if BDRs get re-engaged? And the type of sales cycle that I'm talking about as an example, this one's got an annual 365 days. Every year they're looking at new solutions, typically targeting CMOs or heads of events. So in this particular case, they're seeing it, but I'm seeing it consistently with a lot of customers. It's not just this one particular one, but this one in particular is the one that I can kind of laze in on.
Are you saying, what do you do when we have these dormant opportunities? Where are they becoming dormant? I get the input data, but is the input data largely an open rate or an attendee? Like what are we calling interest?
Great question. So intent data is picking up some signals, meaning they're doing some work on the web, meaning the buyer's doing some research on whatever the offer is, but it's never reaching the stage of the BDR or an AE. Like it's never, ever reaching that stage, but you can see a heck of a lot of activity that they're doing the research, they're putting in the work. So it's kind of like the analogy of a football game where the buyer's going all the way down to the 5-yard line and doing all the homework. And then the last 5 yards, then they're calling up the BDR and AE and saying, okay, you're now in, in cycle.
So the trick here is actually more of a technique than it is of a process. That's usually a fix through technique. And the simplest fix through that technique is, I own HP as an account, and I see through my crystal ball all the engineers that have been screwing around on my website, doing research or downloading white papers or what have you from HP. And I can't wait for the HP engineers to call me. I might even reach out to a few on my own. Hey, Bob, I saw you were looking at stuff on our website. How can I help? That's generally how it works. What we want that rep to now do is collect those data points and then go left or right of IT or whatever, or CMO, whatever it is, go left or right. And now the message becomes, hey, Rob, you got 12 engineers on your team in 2 different locations that have been on our website like 10 times this week. What's going on? And using that as a data point to inform a new conversation, new pipeline ad. One of the challenges BDRs, and really we have in how we, trained BDRs, is we've defined the lead as the person you're talking to, or the point of contact that you're emailing. That's not the lead. The lead is HP. The lead is the organization. So when I see heat in the organization, I could care less about the 10 engineers downloading white papers than on my buyer probably. All I know is that heat is being generated. This HP account just got more interesting to me. I'm going to proactively prospect bucket 1 using that approach of a senior AE. The BDR really has no place here, I don't think. I think the BDR has enormous power within the first 3 months of a sale, enormous power on the bucket of branding we talked about, and enormous power on the bucket of event-driven MQLs. There, that BDR can shine, and their math works. It still works. But as soon as you push that place where they're going to be doing outbound, whether it's on signals or just a target list, the problems Michael mentioned, the problems I mentioned, all surface. And,
Gotcha.
the success rate's poor. What's happened is the head of sales and marketing says, my most expensive rep is the AE or field rep. They have the highest cost of goods sold because of commission. They're also the most experienced and the most flexible and the most nimble. And since it's mostly a numbers game anyway in the beginning of the pipeline, let me get ditch diggers to dig ditches, and when they find something hard at the bottom of the spade, yell over the fence, oh, I got one. That has been the model for 15 years in this role. It will not work anymore. It stopped working and it won't work. That actually the instincts we have to divide and conquer are wrong. Whenever we introduce friction into a sales pipeline, we introduce loss and risk. Every time you have a handoff, you have purge, you have loss, you have risk. So one of the challenges we always have is to limit and push friction deep as possible. We are violating every possible sales and marketing lesson we've learned over the last 50 years with this BDR construct. We're completely ignoring what we know is true. But if we took it with some courage and pivoted the BDRs to the types of leads that are most likely to engage, and we leave the ditch digging work to the rep who makes the most money if they hit something hard, as well as doesn't have to hand it off, can work the deal once they get there, it works better. It works far better. It freaks out people that go, well, there's all these opportunities that aren't being called. And I don't know how to answer that. It's like, okay, attack that with your marketing function, not your sales function. It's not a people issue. That's branding issue. That's a lot of things.
So Jeff, I want to continue this. A lot of organizations, how they de-risk themselves. Well, you know what, Jeff, I don't want to invest in that BDR function. And this company in Toronto just recently called me and they have outsourced BDR functions. So the question for you is, one, and maybe it's multifaceted. Does that approach outsourcing BDR? Is it like outsourcing your marriage? And two, if I were to outsource, what would I outsource on and how could I make it work?
Well, I mean, it's true with anything we outsource. When we outsource as business leaders, we have to be crystal clear on what we're trying to achieve with this investment. And if it's just outsourcing a function instead of outsourcing a goal, outsourcing a functions never work.
Yep.
But outsourcing a goal can work, and it can work with BDR. I've always recommended that if you're going to outsource elements of sales and marketing, it should probably be around pilots or new product development or new marketing challenges. Like really trying to get where the no's give equal data as the yeses. It's just a really quick and easy and cheap way to get good marketing research. If you're fully investing that BDR as outsourced, my question would be, well, what's your marketing function look like?
Yeah.
Because my guess is you're going to want to have elements of this to remain in-house in marketing. And then maybe you're really outsourcing a marketing goal instead of a sales goal. Because here's the number one reason why these outfits rarely give the success they preach. You're a salesperson. How attractive is it to work for one of those companies? Imagine that's the talent that will be calling on your behalf. Those that find those are not your top reps. So outsourcing guarantees a diminished factor in quality. And that has to be figured in your calculus if you're going to do it. I know that there might be someone on the call that's in that world. Sorry about this, Joe.
No, hey,
no. Can I just ask a question on that? That's such a pointy thing. Sorry for coming off mute, but I totally agree with that, Jeff. And also, I have salespeople who think and believe they're best placed in the conversation. They're great consultative salespeople, but they struggle in this day and age to get into the conversation. That's the main, that's the blocker.
And we've now accepted this as from myth to fact. And now we're supporting that belief by increasing our investment in BDR so the AE doesn't have to cold call. This game that has been played, if you rewind it all the way, this goes back to AE's salaries and the lack of leverage comp plans have. It's like we screwed this up so long ago that we started believing our own stuff. The truth is, what you described, Dan, is very fixable. That's a technique or training problem. And we've got sales ops and enablement and lots of functions that can help. Number one. Number two, if the AE has unclear definitions of what their territory is, then they look at inbounds come to me, outbounds are my BDR, and call me if you get lucky. And if you change the way that conversation can occur and you change the compensation plan, watch how fast a 20-year veteran as an account executive learns how to cold call again. Watch how fast they'll do it. But the idea is that if you're lucky enough as an AE to be able to whet your appetite and hit your quota based on the 2 buckets of inbound leads that the new BDR is working on, God love you. But that's icing on the cake. Getting into HP, getting into Price Waterhouse, that's an AE role. That's an AE job, not a BDR job. Because you're telling me that the Price Waterhouse lead is buried in 980 others in this campaign you're doing, and that's going to, all of a sudden, I'm going to get a CISO from PwC is going to call me? That has to be exclusive language from the rep.
Excellent point. Other folks, more questions for Jeff, because I've got we'll have a few more that Jeff and I want to cover. Unmute yourself. Okay, so I think people will be in chat, but there's questions in
I haven't looked at them all, sorry.
Yeah.
I think we got to most of them, Robert. People jumped in, so go ahead.
I think we're good. So Jeff, what I want to talk about, the actionable stuff now. Yeah. And so the scenarios, we've got an existing sales organization with a BDR function that's probably limping along. I'll argue, and based on my research over the past 6 months, that nobody's really crushing it. It tends to be, some people are getting along just, okay. Some people are doing well, but majority just aren't really, hitting what they want. And that could be what we talked about initially. So pragmatically, you're walking in to an organization And, and I'll just provide some context. I inherited a struggling sales organization when Jeff and I teamed up, and we laid out an entire approach. And within 18 months, we were the fastest growing privately held company in Boston. In terms of sales revenue, it was terrific. So we did a lot of structured stuff. And Jeff, my compliments. As we turn around how we structure the organization, this is what we need to do, harsh prioritization. And so in general terms, for folks that are looking to, everybody on the call in their sales or marketing counterparts, in 2023, what's the model look like? What changes have to be done? If I were to summarize, say, the 3 steps that organizations should do right now. So everybody who leaves the call today, it's like Jeff said this, they're going in saying, I'm doing 1, 2, and 3. I know it's broad, it's going to depend on the organization, but what does selling look like in 2023?
So the first thing is, I already mentioned a little, and that's identifying the number of touch points generally required to close a typical deal in the organization. How many touch points and what happens in those touch points? That's the first step. But within that step, it's not just identifying there are 5 steps. It's identifying what has changed from step 1 to 2, 2 to 3, et cetera. What is the tangible, what we would call in sales, exit criteria? What happened that allowed them to grow up to stage 3? Those have to be tangibly identified. And then step 2, because that's 3 steps, Rob. Step 2 is ensuring that your sales stage definitions correlate to the exit criteria you found. Meaning, if there are 4 touches on average, and the 3rd touch, these are on deals that have closed. This is not like, what do I hope it is? What do I wish it is? No, look backwards. Let's look at the last 100 deals. If that 3rd step typically is, let's say, a proposal review meeting. So that's where the rep and maybe procurement and the champion or hero are all on the call together, going through and doing some negotiation and going through the terms and conditions and getting a sense of what that project plan looks like. If that is a significant one, then that has to be identified as your stage 6, meaning that you can't put a deal in stage 6 where this hasn't happened. We can't advance a deal because it's pleasantly going well. We can only advance a deal if it's those exit criteria on what we've identified on these touch points have happened. That's the second thing you want to do. Now you have a pipeline that makes sense to all, which leaves us with our 3rd piece. Our 3rd piece is to look for, think about the 3 buckets I mentioned and where the ones are that are the most potent for your company or your client's company. But then identify where is the break in the funnel. If this doesn't work, what does work? What does work is, I don't have one here, is like a champagne glass where it's really wide mouth and then it gets nice and narrow in the stem. Where is the mouth to stem? Where is the precarious cliff? Is it a demo? Is it a trial? Is it a discovery call? Which of the steps that we know we need to close a deal is the one where we're like, put on your seatbelts? Because if it doesn't work here, we lose them forever. If it does work here, it probably closes. You've done those 3 things, you'll be able to answer your client or your own specific questions on BDRs so much faster, because then you'll see what you should see, which is really 2 funnels, the funnel of interest and the funnel of desire. And which is what we started with in this call. And if we can align appropriately, where do you think you want your BDRs to live? In which of those worlds? Where do you want your reps to live? And that's on your own skill levels and who you've hired and more details about your buyer. We want heavy lifting on the shoulders of those who can handle it. And we want nimble and speed on the legs that can handle it. So we want to make sure we put the right people in the right room. But it starts with those. I would do those 3 things right now. That's what we advise our clients to do. And we help with.
Jeff, spot on that. Before we turn to questions, I want to go a little deeper on touch points. And I don't want to just say, like everything else, we have assumption. What is a touch point? And
real simple definition we've always used. Touch point can be established when you get a response from an outbound correspondence, email, DM. That's 1. Number 2, a touch is one where a conversation on the phone beyond 30 seconds. Right. So we call that a touch too. So phone calls less than 30 seconds don't register as a touch. Emails that don't get responded don't register as a touch. I have never understood metrics and guidelines and targets where just the raw output of the rep becomes a data point.
Yeah, that's the gist of what I'm getting at. And that's we see it all
I
the
don't care how
time.
many calls you made. I want to know how many 30-second conversations you had. That's the metric I want. And that changes the numbers real fast.
Radically.
Particularly with BDRs. If your BDR is at a 1.5% response rate, which by the way, puts them in the top 10% of BDRs in the country. That's how bad the response rates are right now. 1.5% is considered good now. So you have a rep with a 98.5% failure rate. What do you want to measure? If you're telling me it's the activity, you're nuts. What do I care about how much spinning it takes to do 98.5% fail? All I've got to figure out is this math going to work? Because I'm not hiring 1,000 BDRs. So if 1.5% doesn't work,
for that.
What's that?
Sorry, just coming up mute again for that. But those numbers mean that, to me, the whole system needs to change, because we can't be shooting for 1.5%.
No, but what do you think's easier to fix? Changing your outbound prospecting from 1.5% response to 5% response. That's one challenge. Yep. Or challenge 2, making conversion from demo to trial improve by 5%. What's easier? Definitely the second. Definitely the second. What has a bigger impact at the end of the equation? The second. So it's not like, the numbers suck because we're focusing on the wrong numbers.
Yep.
Spot on. Okay, so we're at 8:40, folks. We have 5 more minutes, and I'm going to have Jeff do a close at the end of how we can get in touch with him and his organization. But chime in, Michael. I've seen some stuff for you, and Galen also. Galen, why don't you chime in? You had a comment there?
Yeah, first of all, this is awesome. I really think.
Fun talk.
Yeah. I think the energy that you bring, obviously, Jeff, is great, right? And if every BDR on the planet brought this energy, I can see why they would be successful, right? So, but I think, talking to people all day long that struggle with these issues, every channel is getting more difficult, no matter which one it is, right? There's friction the whole way. And I comment back in the day, I was a product manager and ended up VP sales, right? Because I broke into this new market by cold calling, a phone with push buttons, right? Yeah. Direct mail with a self-addressed stamped envelope, fill out the form, we'll send you a VCR video, right? So going way back, as a VP of sales, I prospected, and as I'm thinking about this, is there sort of a hybrid where, in HubSpot, my land's HubSpot, there's the target accounts list, which is sort of your sales dashboard. Should your high power people sort of be focused on your target accounts list? And then you've got all these masses out there. A lot of companies maybe are opportunities here. You get your BDRs over on those, sort of more of a numbers game, and you split the model based on potential value, perhaps.
I think,
the
biggest win, if you're thinking about making some changes, ask yourself, where is there a place that the BDR can close a deal? Now, maybe the answer is no place.
Right.
But start with that question, because it's less about target accounts to AEs, the unwashed masses to the BDRs. Right. Well, it's the same rhythm on both ends. So you just said that's a more important plate of food at the buffet, but we're going to every station at the buffet. So it's like, well, okay. Instead of looking, okay, are there elements that if they got lucky and successful on a moment, they could go to another stage or another stage? We want to put BDRs in a place where they chew up like Pac-Man the most they can.
Right.
If we're looking at it like, wouldn't it be nice if we had our top guys in our top 50 accounts and we had this army of people cold calling the other 10,000? That will not work. It won't work. There is no metric to apply to it. It's just, it does not work. That's just not how sales works. It's not how marketing works. Again, the moment a person, not a company, a person is engaged, that person has to be engaged, is only engaged because they personally want to be engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So the exclusive nature of language demands, can we put BDRs on the rest of the accounts? You can if you think the BDR can chew up a lot of dots.
Right.
which means maybe they only go to small business, or maybe they only go to this vertical. Maybe they only go to inbound, or maybe they only go to marketing driven, or maybe they only go to this vertical or previous customers. Being thoughtful on not the everything else falls in BDR land, but no, this is specifically where BDRs have the best luck.
Yeah, I like that.
That makes a lot more sense to me. And the huge unwashed group, that is a marketing function. We will use branding and lead gen to pull out wherever we can. We don't look at that world as accounts. We look at that world as a market.
Yep, I like that. That's cool. Yeah.
So Ian asked a great question, Jeff. We're perhaps we're treating BDRs as, I've managed BDR teams, but there's some BDRs on the call.
Awesome.
And so
they know what I'm talking about. They're on these calls all day.
Yeah. And so what words do you have for them? Because the successful BDR, we may want to say, well, their success is going to be tied to their sales manager or blah, 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 maybe. But oftentimes, and you've made the case that the successful BDR, it comes from right here.
Yeah. So, my advice has always been the same for BDRs. It's true for every rep I ever talked to, but certainly for BDRs. It doesn't matter about sacred cows. It doesn't matter about staying in your lane. If you want to get the most out of your career right now, as well as the career you hope to have in the future, you want to take any live wired call or live email exchange or DM exchange as far as humanly possible. Even if you are chartered with your spiffs and KPIs being meetings scheduled, can you get multiple meetings in the same account in one shot? Can you get them to agree to a demo instead of a meeting? Could you do the demo? Could you take it upon yourself to learn how to do easy demos? Because your value as a BDR will not be in hitting those KPIs, because those KPIs will continue to fail. Your value as a BDR will be, how strong are your legs? Because this is where everyone's headed. Because if we're going to divide and conquer, we're going to do it smartly now. So the role of the BDR, if it's only to do an email cadence based on inputs through all the million sales machines your company bought, and all the different ways that you can, with AI, create a value personalized email. If you're stopping there in your lane, you will be an extinct animal in very short period. There won't be a role for just my job is to type out massive email campaigns. That role is gone. So make yourself valuable by, it's not about how great I am on email. It's about how far I take conversations. It's how far I can take the friction of handing this over. So I'm not handing over a bad lead. I'm handing over a champion lead. I'm handing over a lead. So then that BDR can say, with all seriousness, don't worry about my conversion rates. Look at my reps' conversion rates. The reps I support are closing more business than the typical rep in this company. Just because I give them better opportunities. Because the 5% improvement at demo crushes a 5% improvement on cold calling.
Yeah, spot on.
So Rob, one thing, I shared a link. I'm hosting a best practices session tomorrow, and we're going to talk about 7 of these programmatic approaches to driving prospect meetings. So if anybody wants to join that, you're welcome.
Thank you, Michael. We have one late one, and then we're going to close. I'll take one more. Hey, Jeff, I see you're on the call. And Jeff, you want to chime in, or you want me to read your question?
Was it another Jeff? Oh, there's another Jeff.
Okay.
Yep. Is this Jeff? Rob,
Jeff Ernst.
Jeff Ernst. Yes. Yeah. And so I would say there's just from the faces I see and my friends and a lot of my Any Excuse friends here, a lot of us are marketers or serve marketers. And so we're information sponges, right? We always want to be on the bleeding edge, but sales leaders tend to not be, right? They tend to think they know everything, especially those in their 50s or 60s. And so how do you start to get some of these ideas into one of our clients' head of sales who still thinks that it's just a numbers game? We just need to be pounding our email list with cold emails and just pounding the phone every day.
So you just answered your own question, Jeff. Because what did that pain in the butt VP of sales just say? Strip out all the word. I heard one word loud and clear: numbers. The quickest way marketing can ever bridge a conversation with sales is numbers. So yes, you guys are great at information absorbing, but no sales executive is going to really put a lot of stock in a theory of a colleague in marketing as much as they would if that theory from the colleague in marketing had a nice big old dashboard of data. Here's the typical sale. You start showing a head of sales, forget sales length, Bob. Look at your touch length. Look at where you have your breakdowns. Look at where you're losing opportunities. Watch that VP of sales eyes go like this. I'll go, I'm listening. Because they're judging their world through those data dashboards. And just as it's easy to say, and I think there's truth to it, like the sales folks are kind of stuck in their ways and they think they know everything. Okay, fine. But isn't it equally true that marketing, to your point early in this conversation, Rob, that heads of marketing are very good at making the conclusion apparent in any shift in metrics that are targeted? Because the ability for marketing to describe the value to the organization sometimes is baffling, where it's like, we have contributed to 82% of the revenue this year. The sales VP doesn't buy that, but you're preaching it. So the answer is usually in language. It's always, whenever there's a problem between parts of an organization, it's what's the vocabulary? If marketing and sales agrees on definition of exit strategy or exit criteria, these sales stages, if you agree on the exit, then when marketing does a campaign and is judging the value of the campaign against sales metrics, and sales now can go to marketing and say, we need more event driven because those leads look like this, then you have a healthy conversation and you're not arguing. But it starts with the three things I said to Rob, 10 minutes ago. Get everyone on the same page on what these stages mean and what the risk is at each stage. And that'll calm a lot of the conversations.
And let's say you, Jeff, just if I could dig into it, let's say you know what that friction point is or where that drop-off point is, and it is actually from like demo to really, highly interested deal opportunity. But the head of sales still says, we just need more at bats. Because our close rate is going down, we just need more at bats.
What you say back is, you're right. Where do you want them to take their at bat? Joe, we need more at bats. We get it. But where do you want those bats? On cold calling? Look at the numbers. It makes no sense. We get 10% better. It's not going to matter to the revenue number. So you're right on the at bats. I think we want the at bats at the demo. Oh, if we want the at bats at the demo, and the head of sales goes, yeah, that would make sense. Well, then we get to shift BDRs appropriately. We can. So the sales VP to say that is right. What you want to define is, what inning do you want this batter to be swinging the bat?
Yeah, this is spot on.
Yeah,
so
great point. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So everybody on the call, I'm just going to provide some information in just a second here. On behalf of Sammy, we want to thank Jeff and all of you who've taken the time up this morning to attend. And Jeff, awesome session. The feedback's been great. Oh, I gave you
there's my website. We do sales training and sales and marketing consulting, as I said, to companies all over the country, all over the world. All the information is on our website, including lots of free videos, not all of it on the strategic and kind of E-level stuff we're talking about here. A lot of stuff on technique and tactics that reps eat up, a lot of little videos, long videos, a lot of stuff that's free. Go on in there and have fun and see if there are things that are interesting to you and your teams. We also do a weekly web show. Unfortunately, it's done for this summer. We're starting up again in September, called Tuesdays with Hoffman, which you can also register and see on our site. And I'm all over social. So if you're on the big channels, you'll bump into me. Just type in Jeff Hoffman, you'll find me.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the link in the chat, it's www.sellhoffman.com. And I'll just, as I mentioned before, the reason Jeff is here is because I've worked with him. And it's just, he made me uncomfortable. He challenged me. And if you're a true marketing and sales leader, that's what you want. Jeff didn't come in and say, oh, Rob, you're brilliant. Your marketing message is fantastic. I was actually running both marketing and sales at the time that I brought Jeff in. So I had to determine which side of the brain he was talking to. But we need people like Jeff. We need somebody to challenge the norm, because what we're faced with now is actually very, very critical. Economic conditions and everything else. So it's time for us to revisit this. I'll be making the video available on YouTube. So I would highly recommend, and we'll send a link out to various groups to see this. This is this is a critical and timely call. And so by all means, I'll cheer this out and get it there. So Pam, anything else on the SAMI end that we haven't covered before I hit stop recording?
No, I think you covered it. This was awesome, Jeff. I've also been, following you for 20 years, worked with you a long time ago. So thank you so much for being here. It was just, your energy is infectious, and I think we could be buzzing about this and for the rest of the day for sure. The only thing I would just say is join us on June 15th, where we have another provocative conversation about why ABM isn't enough with Adam Turnus. So that's live on the meetup group, and hope to see you all then on June 15th.
Hey, I wanted to say I made a donation last night, and it was not painful. It was fun.
Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
We'll keep the programming up. So appreciate it. Great turnout today, and probably the best percentage turnout we've ever had. So
I really appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you.
Great
Thanks,
stuff.
Rob.
Thanks, everybody.
thanks, everyone.
Take care.